a seamstress here in Rochester, New York, as well as a sewing teacher. Today we are going to be assembling one of the project packs we have on our website, sewingbyamber.com. It is for a bucket hat. It's a really cute project. If you are looking for a really fun way to do sewing and to learn sewing, go to our website, sewingbyamber.com. We have a variety of projects for kids and adults, and they come all with all the fabrics already cut. We write the instructions ourselves, all your notions and everything in the kit, so you can just start off. So it's really great. Now, today, like I said, we're going to do the bucket hat project. This was part of our sewing camp kit. If you guys have questions as we go, or as I go, just leave them in the comments and I will try to address them as we go along. Okay, so in the project kit, aside from your notions, which would be like, in this case, just threads, some pins, things like that, you're also going to have your instructions. Okay, and then for fabric, mine might look a little bit different than yours, but don't worry, you should have the same pieces. You should have two different prints, a lining and an outside. And so we have two different prints here. We have two circle pieces. Okay, you should have 4 of these wider sort of curved pieces. They may not be as wide as mine, but they're going to be about the same shape, and you should have 4. 2 lining. In this case, I'm going to use my blue as lining, and 2 outside. Okay. And then your rim pieces. And the same thing. The rim pieces are going to be thinner and a little bit more curved. And you should have 2 lining pieces and then 2 outside pieces. Okay. There you go. And that's it. So let's grab our instructions and let's start at the beginning. And then we'll get our machine all set up. Okay. All right, so if you flip to the first page, you have your main sheet that talks about all the different pieces you should have. So here's what we just went over: your top, your sides, your rim is the materials, including the notions to make sure you have everything you need to start your project. If you'll notice, there's a letter assigned to each of these materials included. You'll find this a lot in patterns. They'll associate a number or a letter with the pattern piece just to help you with recognition, because you might see it referred to as top in instructions, but if a pattern maker also uses A, then you know that they're talking about that pattern piece. It also helps when you're looking at what the pattern pieces look like, because if you've never assembled a bucket hat, you might not understand what those different pieces are. So down at the bottom, there's an image of each of the different pieces in this project kit, and they're all lettered. So you have A, B, 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 C, 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 all that, okay? You also note that it gives you a seam allowance of 1/2 inch in this project. Now, if you are more comfortable with a different seam allowance, say a 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter or 5/8 of an inch, you can use, really within reason, any seam allowance you want. But this is important. If you use a seam allowance that is smaller than 1/2 of an inch, your hat is going to come out just a little bit bigger. If you use a seam allowance that's 5/8 of an inch, your hat's going to come out a little smaller. And the other important thing to remember is that you need to use the same seam allowance throughout the whole project. Don't go changing it halfway up, or it will affect how your pieces interlock with each other. Make sense? Okay, so there is another added feature to this particular project that we put on here, and that is how to read these diagrams, because this particular one has a lot of diagrams that we drew for you, and there's a little bit of because we're dealing with circles, there's a little bit of challenge when you're assembling a circle to a circle. You're going to be fine. You're going to have fun with this, honestly, but it is a little bit challenging to relay just in instructions. So to help, what we've done is we've given you like a color coordination thing here. Mine is going to be grayscale. It's the same difference. It doesn't matter. So you can see that if you see something that's all white, you're looking at the right side of the outside fabric. So I'm going to use dropping pieces here. Hold on, guys. Okay. I'm going to use this as an example. So this is my outside fabric, not my lining, and this is the right side of the fabric. The wrong side is this kind of muted side that doesn't look as pretty. Okay, so that's what that's referring to. The wrong side is this next circle. So that's that one. And then we have the right side of the lining fabric and the wrong side of the lining fabric. So find those sides of your fabric, okay, so that you know and you can identify them. And in the meantime, I'm going to turn to the next page and grab out my first pieces. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make sure your machine is all set to go. Okay. Now, if you are joining us for our sewing summer camp kit, if you're not sure how to get your machine all set to go, make sure you go check out the video library. Access to that is on your letter. There are virtual lessons that teach you all about how to go ahead and like thread your machine, your bobbin, spool everything, get it all ready to go. Okay, so my machine, I have my thread in the upper thread. I have it all wound through all these thread guides, and I have my needle threaded as well. I've got a presser foot on, and I've got a bobbin in with the same color thread because I want everything matchy-matchy for this. Okay. Your first instruction says lay down your two outside side pieces. I'm sorry, lay your two outside side pieces down on top of each other with the right sides facing. Okay, and there's a little diagram to show you how to lay them down and then get them right side facing. And if you are confused about which pieces are your top pieces, you can go back out here and say two outside. I'm sorry, outside. If you're confused about which is your outside pieces, you can go out here, okay, and look up your side pieces, your outside side. Wow, it is so much easier to read that term, guys, than actually say it out loud. Okay, if you are confused about what your outside side pieces are, you go back here, you find the sides, they're B, you find the shape down here. They might have a little bit more curve than here, but you get the general idea. They're the thinner of your strips, okay? And we want the outside pieces. Set that over here. So let me tip you down so you can see what I am doing, okay? Move this guy out of the way. Ooh. When you find scraps, I may have been sewing all day, guys. It may have been happening. Okay. All right, so I have my two outside pieces, right? Now in the diagram, it shows you to put them next to each other with these side seams, these shorter pieces right next to each other. Try to get you guys in a little closer. Okay. So you can do that. And then what you're going, oh, you know what? Ha ha ha. Everybody makes mistakes. This is why we check twice, measure once. These are not my side pieces. These are my rim pieces. Ha ha ha. I'm going to tuck these guys away. And I'm going to grab my rim pieces, which are a little bit thicker. Okay, so back to the drawing board here. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so we have them right, same kind of principle. Short sides together like this, lined up here, right side facing up, and then we flip one over onto the other like so. Then you're going to take this thin strip right here. You're going to line up your edges, okay? And you're going to clip or pin them. Okay, it doesn't really matter how you clip or pin them. You're just going to line them up and clip or pin. Now, if your fabric, you want your fabric to be pretty much lined up and everything there. If you're a little bit off in areas, don't worry too much. And this was true for the entire project, because as you sew, sometimes things go off a little bit. Don't worry about that. As long as it's within eighth of an inch, you are good. All right, so now I'm going to get this guy in here. I am going to stick with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Again, you do 1/2 inch like what it calls for. But how do you figure out where to do the seam allowance? How do you figure out what that is? So we talked about this in my last video. Seam allowance is the distance from the outside edge that you have to sew. So I have a 1/2 inch from here to sew, okay? On my throat plate, this little metal piece that's on your sewing machine, you'll see lines. Now your lines might say 1/2 inch, 3/8 of an inch, or they might say just like 10, 20, 30, 40. 10, 20, 30, 40 is referring to millimeters. So it depends if you are using a US sewing machine or foreign sewing machine. This is a Viking, so it is foreign, and that means that it is going to be in millimeters and centimeters. So if you're not sure which line equates a 1/2 inch, all you got to do is measure from your needle over to that line to find that spot. And then you want to keep your fabric on that edge. Okay. When we start off, we're going to put down our presser foot. We're going to get our fabric in underneath our presser foot, and we want the fabric to be a little bit past this hole in the presser foot. So there's a hole here. Make sure your fabric is a little bit past that. The fabric you're using for this project is cotton, so you don't need to worry about starting farther back, like with your fabric back here, like you do with more difficult fabrics, but you don't want your fabric to be right on that hole because it'll get sucked down in. Now, my machine automatically locks my stitch, but I'm going to show you guys each time how to lock your stitch as you go. So let's sew this stitch. So there goes mine, and I back stitch 1, 2, 3, and then I forward stitch 1, 2, 3, and that locks my stitch. Now I'm almost to the end, and I'm going to do the same thing. I do 1, 2, 3, and then back stitch 1, 2, 3, and then I can actually sew right off of the fabric. Then you want to put your presser foot up, pull your threads out, and cut them. Again, my machine automatically does that. So that's why I'm not doing it exactly like that, but we can be flexible, right, guys? Okay, so now that we have all this done, let's take a look at what our instructions say to do next. And this time I will get you the right pieces. Okay, so they want you to do it on, let's see, pin the short sides together and sew them. Okay, so we actually need to do this on both sides. So I'm going to swing this around here. Every time I assemble things like this, there's always different ways of doing them, different orders that pattern makers have you assemble things in. That's why the more patterns you do, the better you're going to get at sewing, because you'll understand different ways that things are assembled. You'll catch yourself before you make mistakes. 1, 2, 3 forward, 1, 2, 3 backwards to lock my stitch. I'm watching the edge of my fabric and making sure that it's following that line. I get to the end, 1, 2, 3 forward, 1, 2, 3 backwards, and then I sew right off. All right, so the next step here, which is B, 1B, it says iron the seams open and flat, top stitch the seam allowance down 1/8 of an inch from the seam. So if you can't understand the image here, I'm going to show you what this means, okay? I don't have an iron, so I'm actually going to use my nails just to push it down. So you're going to kind of lay your project down with one of your seams facing you. So here's one of my seams, okay? Let me get some more light down here. You're going to open that seam up. So you kind of have to pull it flat like that and press it. Again, I'm going to use my finger to kind of press it open. I'm going to do it once on this side. So one on the side with the iron and then the same on that side. Okay. That lays it flat. Do you see how that seam is laying flat? If I leave it like that, it will probably stay pretty much in that position until I wash this, and then it'll flop around. The other thing is when you're sewing, these can kind of fly up. So what we do to make this seam a little bit more durable, but also keep those flaps, those seam allowance flaps where we want, is we top stitch them. Now, if you're like me and you don't have an iron and you're using your nail, you can feel free to go ahead and put a pin or two just to keep that down while you do this. You want to open up your circle because you don't want to be sewing on the other side, and you're going to just put the top part. So make sure this part is not underneath it. And 1/8 of an inch from the edge roughly, basically you just want to be in the middle of this seam allowance from this. You're going from the seam to the edge. And 1/8 of an inch is like right in, like quarter the way in. You can go right down the middle too. That's fine. It's just that you want to kind of be the same distance from that seam so that it looks nice on the other side. All right, so locking our stitch. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And actually, I need to take this guy out because he's in the way. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and sew right off. Cutting my threads and pulling it out. Again, if you don't have a thread cutter button, which is like a pair of scissors, just lift your presser foot up, pull it out, and it gives you where's my focus? A nice little top stitch. So I'm going to do the other side. Oop, my thread came out. Lift up my presser foot. So sometimes, and actually there's a lot of machines that have this little quirk about them. A machine will unless you have like 3 inches left over, when you go to sew, the thread will come out. Okay, and that's because your thread uptake is always, when you start to sew, is pulling the thread this way. It's pulling it out this way. So it's if you don't have enough thread there, it'll just keep pulling it out. So if that's something that happens a lot to you, just make sure you always have at least a couple inches. And I'm just going to use my self threader here. Get that back into place. Okay, make sure my needle is golden there. And I'm going to use my little side cutter to cut my thread. I don't have too much, and let's try this again. So again, forward. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 backwards. Lock my stitch. Lift up the presser foot. I can pull this out and tear it. Now, those same people who are having problems with your thread coming out of your needle when you start to sew, you may also be having an issue where when you lift up your presser foot, you go to pull it, it's too tight. That is caused by your needle not being all the way up. On the right side of your machine, you got a little hand wheel here. You can turn it towards you. So turning it this way will lift up your presser foot. And it will, it'll lift up your presser foot. Oh my gosh, it will lift up your needle. Wow. So I can't sew and talk sometimes. It'll lift up your needle so that it's in the all the way up position, and then it'll loosen up your thread. When your needle's not all the way up, the thread that's coming from the upper here is actually going around your bobbin case. So it's still stuck in there. So you have to basically complete the stitch. Okay, let's do this one. And this is what I mean to be careful of. You don't want to sew over your bottom of your piece. So always be careful. If you get something stuck underneath the presser foot and you need to adjust it, what you can do is make sure your needle's in and then lift your presser foot up, and it allows you to move everything wherever you want it, and then you can continue your stitch. If you don't have your needle in when the presser foot's up, you're loosening all your threads within here, and it can cause a tangle. All right, so now you should have one full ring with some pretty top stitches. A little better so you can see. Pretty top stitches. And if you see, number 1C says just to repeat the process with the liner. So let's go back to the beginning here. We've got 2 pieces. Want them both right sides facing up. Flip one on top of the other so the right sides are kissing. Again, you can pin this to make it a little bit more secure for yourself, lest you have to fumble. Okay. And again, we're locking our stitch first. Ooh, there goes my thread again. It's always when I go too fast for my machine that it doesn't like me. That happened to you guys? And back stitching, going forward, and back stitching and sewing off. Now, alternatively, if you want to do this one at a time, if you can open this up on one side before you do the other side and top stitch it just to save yourself on that one side. Oh my goodness. The thread is not my friend, guys. The thread is not my friend today. All right. Just back stitch and then go forward. Remember, lock your stitch at the beginning, lock your stitch at the end. And I'm going to go back through here before we're to the next step and just trim my threads, but make sure you are trimming threads. It makes your project look so much more professional. And don't feel like you have to go as fast as me. I'm going a little bit faster just because a lot of you guys are going to watch this after the live, and I just want to make sure you don't have to sit here for hours or be constantly fast forwarding. Okay. So that is that. And then we do the other side. Oh my goodness, it did it again. You know, I find it funny because there's some times that my machine never just doesn't do this, and then other threads it just decides it wants to do that. Now the other thing is, you guys can see where I'm doing my hands here. I'm holding on to the fabric, but I'm not pushing down. I'm not stopping it from going forward. I'm using my left to kind of make sure this fabric stays in check. You'll see this more later. And my right I'm using to steer. A lot of top stitching in this guy. So we're going to lay that flat, open up our seam, press it with my finger on both sides. Good. Oh, that's why my machine's probably not so happy. Wrong setting. There we go. All right, locking our stitch at the beginning. Oops, I went way off my fabric. Let's see if I can get back on. Locking my stitch at the beginning and at the end. If you're like me and you just sewed way off before you remember to lock your stitch, don't worry too much. I would go back over it really quick just to make sure it's locked. But when you sew this direction, it's actually going to go over that stitch and lock it as well. Okay, let me get all my threads trimmed. So let me know in the comments below, guys, what type of sewing machine you own and why you like it, or maybe why you don't like it. I myself, I love my Husqvarna Vikings, a couple of them. They've lasted me for a long time. They also have really good customer service. This is not a paid promotion. I just really like their stuff. But I also really like Brother. I think that Brother is a really good, affordable brand that is pretty well made. I've seen really old Brothers that come to life with a very minimal effort. So that's really cool. Singers aren't bad either. I do feel that Singers have cheapened their quality from the ones that we all grew up with, but they're still not too bad. Okay. All right, so now we have these two pieces together. Yay! Let us see what the next steps are. Pick you guys back up. Hi! Did you miss my face? Okay. So we are now on step 2, which is marking the tops and sides. Okay. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be attaching the sides to the top. But to do that, we need to have some markings because the tops themselves are like an oval, very slightly oval. Okay. And what we want to do is we want to make sure everything lines up in the same way properly to this oval. So we do that by marking it. So you're going to lay down your outside sides. I can never get this right, guys. And I'm the one who wrote this. Lay your outside sides next to the outside top of the lining sides. Okay. Lay your outside sides next to the outside top and the lining sides on the to the lining top. So you're basically taking your outside sides and your lining sides and lining them up to the tops. I know it's hard. It's hard to write instructions. I will be clear about that, because you're trying to convey what you just do and what you show people. Like I'm more of a tactile person, and most people that sew are. So you're trying to relay this information verbally here on words rather than showing, which is hard. But whenever you get confused with instructions, just slow it down like I just did a minute ago and take it one thing at a time. So you're going to lay everything down with the right sides facing up. The sides circles may not lay flat, and that's fine. You just kind of are laying things out. This is something that I think is really important whenever you're sewing it. I'm going to start with the outside pieces, and then we'll do the lining afterwards. Because it's very important to lay your project out in a way that makes you understand that, oh, this is how it's supposed to go as you go. Like makes it look like the piece, because it helps you avoid mistakes. Okay. So here I have my circle, and you want if you notice your curve, there's an outside curve and an inside curve. The inside curve is what you want to touch the hat, and it's not going to lay completely flat. You just kind of want to be in this position. Okay. We're going to mark, if you look at number B, we're going to mark 4 positions using a clip or a pin, and we're going to call these north, south, east, and west. It's just for reference. Okay. So we'll start, let's start with the circle because that's what the instructions say. So we'll start with the circle. So you want to kind of find the longer side of the circle. Okay. That's going to be your north and your south. So I'm going to use clips because I think that they are easier to use. What I like to do when I'm dealing with circles is I like to fold them in half, like so. And then I like to clip or pin right at that fold. You can like put a little fold in there and then clip. Okay. So I've just found, you can double check yourself, make sure you're accurate, north and south. Wow. I gotta keep this where you guys can see it. North and south. Okay. Then we flip our page over. We're on number 2B. Next, bring those points together. So I folded it like this, right? Now we're going to bring those points together. So we're going to bring our clips together to fold it this way. Where the fold is that you just made, mark your east and west points. Okay. So east and west. Okay, so now I have 4 points marked on this. And also make sure that you are marking a single layer of fabric is always important. What I mean by that is when you go like this, don't take it and mark, don't like put it in half and put the pin in like that. You want to just like think of it like a taco shell, and you're just getting 1 layer of taco. Okay. All right. Then we're going to do the same thing on here. Okay. So I like to do my seams on east and west. So I'm just going to say my seams are east and west. So I'm going to go and put my seams together. Okay. And I'm going to mark north and south for that. And it's the same exact principle. Okay. And I will put a couple clips there just so you guys can visualize. All right. All right. I know it says repeat with the lining. We're going to go through and just complete this, go on to the next step with this one, and then I'll go back and do the lining as well. Okay. Let's see here. Right. So we're going to flip the circle, which is this guy. So the right sides are facing up. I'm sorry. The wrong sides are facing up. Okay. Which means the right sides are facing. And you know, it's really funny. When I went to write these, I was like, it took me forever to write this one because I was like, wait, how does this go? Basically, guys, what we're trying to do is we're trying to put the right sides facing each other. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to find your east point or your west point. Find your west point on here. You're going to match up those clips with the right sides facing each other. This is what it's trying to show you in that image that you see. See that? Okay. You're going to find those clips, clip them together. You're going to move a clip over. Okay. And actually, at this point, I'm going to start using pins because whenever you're sewing a circle, it helps to be using pins. Okay. So I've got my one side all clipped. Now I'm going to do the other side. So I'm just going to flip it over. Okay. Okay, see, and I'm going to bring the right side of that circle with my clips together. So the clips not only help you match up equal distance around the circle, they are also going to help you make sure that you're using the right side of the circle. And then you do the same thing with your north and south pins. It should be a little bit easier by now, okay? Clip them together. Now you'll know if you use the wrong seam allowance on your side pieces because you'll have a problem with this next step, okay? What you're going to be doing is you're going to be pinning along the sides. So now we're going over to number 3D. We're kind of skipping ahead a little bit because I've shown you more. We're going to pin this all together in between those pieces, okay? Take this slow, and you're going to do it a pin an inch at a time and do what I show you, okay? So I take it, and I go an inch, and I kind of bend the fabric, okay? I'm bending the fabric on this curve, okay? You can even find a middle point too, if that's easier for you. We're going to bend the fabric, and we're going to put in a pin about an inch in. I'm going to go a little farther. I'm going to do another inch, another pin. And I go a little farther, and I'm going to pin all the way around. Okay? And if you find that one part of your circle, which is very common, is a little shorter than the other part, then just go ahead and adjust your points. It just means that your north, south, east, west wasn't perfectly aligned, which is, like I said, very common. So just an inch at a time. And I'm using these two fingers, and I'm just bending the fabric. You are sewing on a curve. You really only need to make sure like your seam allowance away from the edge is good. Beyond that, you don't have to worry about it. I cut this one a little bit bigger than your projects just so that I could have some clear visuals for you guys. Here. Almost all the way around. Now, if you do wind up having an area where you're just going to wind up with a pucker and you can't avoid it, you can always go back a step, seam rip all of this out, and make a bigger seam allowance to adjust it. Or you can add a little pucker into the top of your hat. And if you're going to do that, I always recommend doing it by the seam because it's a little less noticeable. Okay? So now that we've got that all pinned, it's starting to look like a hat, right? We're going to go and sew that together. I'm going to bring over my machine, and I would start at one of your side seams. That's the easiest place to start. And I would put your side and sew on the circle just because it's easier to keep everything together. So you're going to find a spot to start, line up your edge to your seam allowance, lower your presser foot, start by locking your stitch. Actually, I'm going to get this guy right there. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then you notice my fabric's curving this way. Here, I'll get you guys a little closer so you can see from the top. You see how my fabric's curving this way? There we go. Curving this way. And I'm letting it curve. I'm not trying to go like this. I'm not trying to straighten it out. Okay? Because if I straighten it out, then what happens is you wind up with a ripple. So I want to let the fabric curve. Okay? Instead, what I'll be doing is using my hands to curve it as it reaches my seam allowance. So you want to find a point on your seam allowance, probably about halfway up here, that you can see the edge hit, where that curve hits your seam allowance. And what you want to do is, as you sew, you always want to make sure the edge at that point is on your seam allowance. And that way you can make sure that you're not overturning or underturning. So my point is right about here, and I'm just keeping an eye on it, and I'm adjusting in between the pins to make sure that I'm turning it enough. And again, if you get stuck and you need to adjust your fabric, put your needle in. You can turn this to put your needle in, press your foot up. You can adjust, press your foot back down, and keep sewing. Notice I'm using my hands to adjust the fabric as I go. I need to adjust again. I'm adjusting the fabric as I go. I'm pulling the piece underneath here and flattening it out in this little 1-inch area, and that's helping me an inch at a time make everything nice and flat. Again, I'm adjusting the fabric in that area. And as you go around the circle, you're going to want to adjust the fabric over here. You're going to want to keep bringing it forward. Straightening it out. And generally speaking, you want your needle in and you want to adjust before you pull out your next pin. Because if I adjust before I pull out that next pin, or I'm sorry, after I pull out the pin, then what's going to happen is your fabric's going to slide and you're going to have issues. Again, adjusting, avoiding problems, making sure how many puckers. I might have an unavoidable pucker on my end. How are you guys doing going around? I'm going to try to push my pucker over to the seam as best I can. Okay. All right. And then lock your stitch at the end once you're all the way around. Okay. Yeah, I got a little bit of a pucker, but not too bad overall. We can turn it right side out. You can see how pretty it is. Now, this is not in the instruction, but if you feel like it would add to your piece to do a top stitch around here, feel free to do a top stitch around the top. I don't know that I'm going to in this one. I guess I'll see, and I'll wait and see how it looks with the other piece on the inside and see if I like it or not. Okay, let's do this one more time. I'm going to go a little bit faster this time. All right, I've got my second piece, folding it long ways. I'm going to use pins this time, putting my pins in north and south. Remember, one layer of fabric so that I can open it up like that. Connect my pins to each other. Goes in. Pins. Never be afraid to repin too, guys. There's nothing wrong with repinning. Okay, match up my east and west seams. Oh, poke myself. All right. And then I'm going to flip this over, right sides facing. So I turn it out to the wrong side out. I take that point that's north and I line it up with the top pin and I just move the pins. So I do my north, I flip it over the other way. Right. Get my south. I'll do my east and west, and then I'll go around and do the in between. So we're sewing on a circle, and when you're sewing on a circle, you really don't want to worry too much beyond an inch from your seam allowance, because we are creatures that have curves. We are not a box, and anytime you're dealing with a curve, you can't expect things to lay flat. We can't lay flat. Our bodies can't lay completely flat, so neither can the fabric. So you always want to be concerned with about an inch from the seam allowance. Just making sure that area is flat will ensure that you don't see any puckering. So this is very true for clothes. It's also true for bags, hats, obviously, because we're doing hats. Get that pretty pin job. Oh, I love it. Remember, we're using our pinchers here. We're pinching as we go. Okay. One more section. I can go ahead and sew that up. And then we're just to the rim, guys, and we're done. We're so close. Okay. So I've got my hat. I'm going to pick a spot. I'm going to lock my stitch. And then I'm going to take it one pin at a time. And I'm always, anytime I need to adjust, my needle goes in, my presser foot goes up. I'm turning the fabric as I go. Take your time. Go slow if you need to. This is not a race. I have been sewing for a very, very, very long time. So if I go a little bit fast, that's why. And even I get in trouble from going too fast sometimes. So take your time. The slower and more determined you go, sometimes the better the project. Not always the case, but your fabric also has a little bit of pull because it's cotton. So if you really are having trouble getting everything to lay flat, you can give it a little bit of a tug as it sews, but be careful doing that just because you will create a pucker when you release it. It shrinks back up. Also, sometimes you'll have a problem with little foldovers if you go outside of your seam allowance. If you're going too far in, sometimes that will result in some little foldovers of the fabric. Okay. Lock your stitch. Clearly, I didn't take enough time on this first one to pin it because this one was no puckers. Now the other thing is when you're sewing on a curve, okay, it helps to clip the inside fabrics so that they can curve too. I didn't include it in the instructions on this because honestly, it's not as big of a thing, but usually you would, okay? So now we've got our lining piece. We're going to turn that wrong side out. We're now on step number 4, page 5. You're following along instructions, so right down here. Turn the outside completed top right side out. Turn the lining wrong side out and slide them into each other's. Now, if you decided not to do the top stitch, I'm going to tell you right now, you might want to go back over this before you move on to this step and just trim some of the seam allowance away. Whenever you do this in a project, it just gives you less bulk to deal with. Okay, makes it look a little bit cleaner, a little smoother. So I'm just going to take away, and I'm leaving like 1/4 of an inch on there. I'm making a mess on my floor. There we go. That. Same on my lining. So many tips and tricks we're learning today that are not in the instructions. This is why I love teaching sewing lessons, because there's just so many things that can come up in a lesson that you just don't think about when you're writing stuff on paper. If you happen to cut your stitch when you're doing this, just words to the wise, make sure that you go back over and reseal your stitch. So you'll start before the cut and after the cut, lock your stitch on both sides. Okay, let's match these guys up just like it shows in the instructions. I'm matching up my seams first, making sure those line up nice and pretty. And I'm putting a pin in to keep them in place. And I'm going around to the other one, doing the same thing, matching up those seams there. Machine. My seam there, my seam here, lining them all up, putting a pin in. And then I'm actually going to put a couple pins along the bottom here. Oh, wait. Ha! Guys, I put my outside on the wrong side. I'm so silly. There we go. This is how we want it to look. I'm very used to assembling things inside out because I make bags a lot of times. And it's you always are doing bags, for the most part, at least my bags, inside out, and I'm pulling them out right side out so you don't see all the seams. Okay. Put a couple extra pins around the edge, and notice I'm just kind of like pushing the bowls together. That's what they look like right now, is bowls, not hats. I'm pushing the linings together. Okay. So it should look something like this with your lining on the inside. Okay. Let's flip the page on our instructions. Pin along the bottom. Oh, we just did that. And baste them together 1/4 of an inch. So if you do not know what basting is when we sew a stitch that's not going to be seen in the end piece. Basting can be used to make a pucker in a skirt, like a pleat. It can be used to fold over the edge of satin. In this case, it's being used to keep these two pieces together so we don't have to worry about the pinning aspect of it. Because when we attach the rim, it's going to be another 2 pieces, and we just don't want to worry about that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just sew really close to the edge. We don't even need to lock our stitch with a basting stitch. We just can sew. Of course, my machine is going to lock it because that's what it does. My bobbin thread's getting low. Now, if you have any overlapping on your pieces, this would be the time you want to trim it away. So if at any point, and I did this on purpose so you guys could see, so if at any point you have like a little bit that's not matching up completely at this stage in the game, just go ahead and trim that away, okay? A little bit like that's not going to be bad, but you want it to look neat in the next step, okay? Okay, our next step is assembling the rim. Now this is going to be very similar, at least initially, as assembling the sides. So let me grab those pieces. Give ourselves some room. Set the hat over there. And again, it's going to be the same thing. Literally, I'd say to go back to those original steps and assemble them. So we're going to take our pieces and lay them down, right sides facing up. Put your right sides together. And then sew down the side seams. Okay, so I got my circle here. I'm going to lay my seams flat, press them preferably, and then I'm going to top stitch those. Again, I am using my machine's little doohickeys where I can push a button here and it cuts and blocks my stitch for me. You want to go 3 forward and 3 back to lock your stitch at the beginning and end of every stitch I'm showing you. Okay, so I've got my lining piece all assembled and top stitched. Now I'm going to do my outside piece. Again, laying them down, right sides facing up, flip them so right sides are facing, line up those short edges. And I think I need to spool my bobbin. So when you go to spool a bobbin, your machine has, I'm going to get you up here for a minute and bring you over. Your machine has like this guy. He's a bobbin pin, spooling pin. So this guy actually will rotate with your bobbin on it when you put it through the steps, and it will allow you to spool your own bobbins. When you push it to the right, you notice my screen changed, but what it does is it changes the motor from over here to over here. And if your motor isn't running when you press your pedal, if you push this left, it changes back over to that motor. Okay? So I'm going to quickly get my setup here. Every sewing machine is a little bit different in how they want you to spool the bobbins. If you do not know how to do this, make sure you check out those videos as part of Sewing Camp. I'm just going to do a little bit because I don't need a lot right now. It's not a color that I'm going to be using in a while. And rethread my sewing machine. And if you're like, wow, it's so fast, it's because I practiced so much. I first started using a sewing machine on my own. Now with my grandma overseeing me, my grandma was a seamstress. I was really nervous about the whole doing the bobbin, threading my machine, it just got to a point where I would not even change my colors. I was just always so nervous about it. But now, like, I have practiced it so much that it doesn't bother me. I will change them 10 times a day. It's no big deal because I'm really fast and familiar with my machine. And that comes from practicing. Practice, 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 practice. That's why when I had my virtual course, I always gave my students, ooh, that one didn't lock. I always gave my students homework, and my in-person students will tell you too, I give them homework between lessons. Completely optional, but so helpful. It gets you through that time between lessons. It makes you practice. And there goes my thread again. All right, almost done, guys. We'll move on to the next step. And just remember to trim your threads, make it look all neat. Careful not to cut your fabric when you trim. There's a lot of different kinds of thread scissors. The important thing is that they're just sharp. That's the most important thing. So you don't want to use them on paper. Avoid using them on plastics and stuff like that. Just keep them nice and sharp. And if you have a pair that you love and they've dulled, oh my goodness, I want to sew, and they've dulled out, then just go get them sharpened. They have sharpening people in that will sharpen your scissors. Okay, I'm going to restitch this, but I want to show you that stitch, it skipped a stitch in the beginning. It just happens for a variety of reasons, but anytime it happens, by locking your stitch again, you want to sew past the part. Try to line up with the stitch that's there, and then lock your stitch over that stitch. What that's going to do is it's going to knot the existing stitch so you don't have to redo the whole thing. Okay? All right, so we have our lovely piece here. Let's move on to the next step, assembling your rim. We were on, now take your rim pieces. We did steps 1A through 1C on them. Now we're going to put both, once both are together, lay the lining and outside pieces down with the right sides facing up. Uh-oh, you guys recognize that? Because we've done it a few times. There's one, here's two, and then flip the lining onto the outside piece so that the right sides are facing each other. We're going to line up our seams because we want this to be all pretty. Right sides facing each other. And let's get to pinning all the way around. Okay. We're going to be pinning the outside edge. That's the bigger edge on the outside, and that's what we're going to be sewing as well. Make it nice, pretty top stitch. Okay. My rim is a little overcut on this side for some reason. Again, I made mine a little bit bigger than yours. So apparently I did a really horrible job at cutting it on this side. I'm just going to trim that down quick. anytime you do a project, and yours will be not like this. This was me doing a pattern adjustment without actually testing it before this video. But if you ever are doing your own project where you're cutting the fabric and you find that something's off like that, first always double check that you've got your piece cut out correctly before you do any trimming like I just did. But in the end, before you sew it, before you attach it to another piece, always trim it. Always like trim off your extra just so you can keep your seam allowance nice. All right, let's start by locking our stitch. There we go. Again, I'm going to let this curve do its thing and go to the side. I'm going to use my hands to turn it as it reaches that point on my seam allowance guide on my throw plate here. I'm going to go over where I started, lock my stitch, and pull it out of here. And then flip to the next page, page 7. We're almost to the end. Okay, so we just did line up the seams, pin around the outside, then sew around the outside edge. Cut tiny triangles into the seam allowance that you just sewed, then turn your right side out. So right now it looks like this. Tiny triangles can look like so. Okay, see I'm getting close to the edge, but not. You could also, if you don't want to spend a lot of time, just do a bunch of little clips. Okay, that works too because it still allows the fabric to fold over itself. It can also be like swoops. Go for the swoops. Like something like that. You just want it to be thinner and not so much fabric. I'm actually going to just trim mine down and put some snips in myself. Just because that fabric needs a place to go. Okay, when you are flipping it, you're turning it the other curve concave. So it's like you need to have a place for all that fabric to go, and it wants to bunch in on each other. But if you have clips, if you've either removed some of the fabric or put like little snips in there, the fabric will either fold over itself neatly or you'll just have extra room for it to lay down flat. And that eliminates like this bunchy look. You can also, if you have a pair of pinkering shears, which are those scissors that have zigzags, mine are like somewhere lost in my room. You can also just cut it down with those because those will create your circles automatically. Whew, my wrists are hurting, man. I have been sewing a lot lately. My wrists are not happy with me. If you accidentally sew or cut your stitch, just go ahead and repair it the same way we talked about a minute ago, where you start before the snip and after the snip, lock your stitch up both ends. Let's see here, almost there. Okay. Once you've got that all done, you're going to take it, you open it up like so, and turn it inside out. Now, as you turn it, take it a little piece at a time, pull that seam allowance apart and lay it flat. You can pin it or you can press it this way. In the instructions, it says press the sewn edge flat because pressing it is actually the best way to handle this. Again, I don't have iron available where I am right now in my sewing space. So I am just going to take this a little bit at a time and make it pretty. I'm actually going to do this from this side up so that I can make sure the rim lays where I want it to lay. Now we are going to do one top stitch around the edge. Beyond that, it's kind of optional if you want to do more than that. Bucket hats usually have a few top stitches sewn into them, depending on how much space you have. The important thing is that they're equal distance. If you look in your instructions, say number 6B, top stitch, we're on page 7, top stitch along the side you just sewed, so that's this side, 3/8 inch from the edge. Okay. Three-eighths inch from the edge, and then the next step says repeat this 2 to 3 times, each time about 3/8 inch from the last stitch. So it's just a way for you to create those lines equal distance. And if you're wondering what 3/8 inch is, measure from your needle to the edge of your presser foot, because chances are, on most machines at least, it is the distance from your needle to your edge of your presser foot for your all-purpose foot, which is the foot that you use for most everything that you're sewing. If it's not, your machine might have the ability for you to move your needle left and right. And then you can move it to the left so you can use the edge of your presser foot on the last stitch to create that really nice top stitch. The 2 ways that you can do that is if you look in your stitches, your machine might list a stitch that has an oval on the top with a dot in it, and it'll show the stitch to the left of that oval. If you don't have that, you can try putting it on a straight stitch and then adjusting the width of your straight stitch, because a straight stitch can't really go wider than a line, so it just moves your needle position, which is kind of cool. Okay, almost done on my end. How you guys doing on yours? Again, pressing this is going to be your best bet just because it's going to give you that pretty rim. But going through it an inch at a time and just making sure it's pushed out all the way is important as well. Okay, it should look something like this with everything. I'm going to raise this up just a hair. With everything all pinned around. Looks kind of like Stargate. I'm going to sew on the top of my fabric because my lining matches my thread. So if that's a little funky, I don't care. Nobody's going to know but me. All right, and then we're just going to, again, lock our stitch and start sewing. Letting it keep the curve and all that. Ooh, did it start? Yeah. I'm using my right hand to pull out the pins, but I've also noticed I'm stopping when I pull out the pins. I'm trying not to sew as I pull them out. That's how you make mistakes, even me. But I'm using my right hand and my left hand to turn it. I'm not just relying on my one hand for this part. Okay, so your first circle should look like this. Now I'm going to move on to the next circle, start in the same position, and I'm just using the last stitch as my guide. Again, this is why it's important to figure out where 3/8 of an inch is relative to your presser foot, because if possible, you want that edge of your presser foot to be your guide that you go by. Honestly, I find this to be the most fun part of the project. So I hope you guys are having fun with these circles. It's great practice for you too to sew round circles. Look how pretty that's looking. Okay, I'm going to keep going and put another one in. Come on, little thread, get out of my way. I don't know, guys. I think I might have room for one more. How I tell that is I'm looking down here. I have my seam allowance goes to about here. So I think if I put one more in there, it's going to look really nice. If you're unsure, though, don't worry about it. You can just not do that last one. It's still going to look really cute. And I got a little pucker there, so I'm just stopping my needles in, presser foot up, and I'm adjusting my fabric, and then I'm going to keep sewing, so presser foot down. Okay, got a little bit of bobbin thread left. Hopefully I don't have to rethread again before the end. We're so close. Okay, so your hat rim should look something like this when you're ready. There we go. You can see it better. Lighting is always a challenge. Okay, now we can move on to our last step. Is this the last step? Second to last step. We're almost there, guys. Okay. So I want to now take my rim, lay it down with the outside facing up, mark my north, south, east, west. Again, if you have any overage of any of the fabrics, feel free to trim them at this point. This would be the time to do it. So funny. I don't know what I was thinking when I cut this one piece of fabric. I don't know why it's like not lighting up. But you know what? That's why pattern makers, believe it or not, we make several attempts at something usually before we find the one that we want. Okay. I'm going to put mine in here and in here. And then I'm going to bring those pins together. And I'm going to find my north and my south. I'm actually really excited. This particular one, so like the ones I make for samples for our sewing camp and for project packs, I tend to keep those just as like something I could show people. But when I do these, I try to make something for myself that I actually keep. And I'm excited to have my own bucket hat. It's been years since I've had a bucket hat. Okay, I'm going to take all these pins and put them on my pin thing. So we have a little space. Come on, come on. My nails are all short. There we go. Okay. So I've got my north, south, east, west on here. And next, mark the same points along the bottom base edge of the hat top. So again, I'm going to find my east, west, where my seams are. And then I'm going to find my north, south by bringing those pieces together like a taco. And doing that. Okay. There you go. And now the next step, you got to flip the page for. So exciting. All right, so we're on the last page, guys. We made it. We're almost there. Match these points, pin as in step 3, pin and sew together along the bottom edge. So if we go back to step 3, we're going to see that we wanted to have our right sides facing. So I'm basically going to keep this guy like laying down with the wrong side facing up, and I'm going to take this one and just kind of put it down so that all I see is the wrong side. And then I'm going to start by matching up my east and my west. Move those pins. And then I'll match up my north and my south, and then I'll pin in between. Okay. Now, after we get this all sewn, the last step is our completed look. So there's one of two ways you can do this. You can just do an overcast stitch along. I'm sorry. My kids are in the background. Girls, I'm live. Everybody can hear what you're saying. Okay, can you be quiet? Can you be quiet, please? Thank you. Those are Amber's kids. Okay. I'm gonna do the flip up and top stitch rather than the overcast stitch. But if you want to do the overcast stitch, it's just a zigzag stitch around the edge. All right, we're taking it an inch at a time. A little bit at a time. And you go around. If you hadn't guessed, my sewing room is out of my house, but we have a closed door. So that's important when you have children and dogs and cats and all that. When I teach my students, I usually teach in their homes, which is super fun. I get to see what they have as their setup and teach them on their own machine. So again, we're sewing, we're pinning on a curve. So we're using our pinchers and we're bending the fabric, taking it an inch at a time. What happens when you go more than that when you're on a curve like this is you wind up not letting your fabric just doesn't match up because you're trying to straighten something out that's supposed to be curved. Okay. One more area. We're almost there, guys. Almost there. Okay. So it should look something like this. And we're going to put it into our sewing machine this way. Okay. So it doesn't matter where you start. I like to start by the seams. Remember your seam allowance was a 1/2 inch or whatever you chose in the beginning. Get your needle in, start. Oops, my thread came out. You're going to start by locking your stitch. I'm hoping my bobbin lasts. Okay, here we go. Again, I'm adjusting in between needles. You guys can see that okay. Let's turn that away so you can see a little bit better. I don't know why that light is so bright in comparison, guys. I'm trying so hard to show you. Here, let me bring you over for a second so you can kind of see what I'm seeing over here. Okay. So you can see where I have everything and I'm adjusting as I go. Let's see if I can have you watch for a minute. Hopefully that helped a little bit, seeing what I did close up. I'm going to just keep going here. Bring this guy back. Oof, look at all the lint on me from all the fabric. Oh my goodness. Almost there. We are at the end of our project. We're gonna finish this guy. It's gonna look so nice. Still good with my bobbin. So sometimes we sew fast and sometimes we sew slow. Nothing wrong with either way. Ooh. And sometimes we prick our fingers. Woohoo! We made it. Okay, look at that. So cute. I love the little ring around the edge like this. I almost don't want to like flip it up and top stitch it. But actually, I think I almost like that more. I don't know, guys. Should I leave it? Should I not? Okay, I'm gonna top stitch it. I'm gonna stop stitch it because I like the look on this side with it top stitched. I think it just makes it not show up down there. All right, how am I doing on bobbin? Oh, I cannot make it. I'm gonna see. Do I have another bobbin that I can use? Yes, I'm going to use this one. This one has a little bit left in it. Just enough for that one stitch. Which is all we really need. Because we're one stitch away from finishing. Are you guys excited? All right, so the last step is this top stitch or the overcast stitch. So the overcast stitch would basically be putting your piece in the machine this way and doing an overcast stitch around the edge there. I'm going to fold it back like this and top stitch it. So what I'm going to do is pin it first. I'm going to fold it back and I'm going to put a pin on this side of the fabric because that's the side I'm going to be sewing on. Whenever you're pinning in this way, which is kind of going next to, it's like going parallel to my stitch line. Ooh, and I found a little piece I got to fix. But whenever you're doing it that way, you always want your point to be in the direction of the back of your sewing machine. It's always good to double check yourself too. Make sure you didn't have any spots that need fixing. I see one already that I have. I love the top stitch look because it just makes everything lay the way you want it to lay. Okay, I'm going to fix this one section. I'm not going to even worry about seam ripping it because I think I can grab it. It's just me going off a little bit. So I'm going to start beyond the section I need to fix, sew the section, and end back at my seam. And that's going to make sure that when I flip it back, see, no problem. Oh, how many times do I prick myself, guys? I pricked myself 3 just in this hole. So long. Okay. Oh, there's another spot I gotta fix. Okay. These look good. I'm going to lay everything down. I'm sewing on this side, and I'm going to find a spot on my presser foot that works with how far I want to go from the edge. Let me just show you where I picked. I chose this little indentation. Okay, back up so you can see. So when I sew, I'm going to keep this edge of the fabric along that indentation of the foot, and that's going to help me to sew straight. There you go. Locked my stitch. And every now and then I have to readjust. I'm still working on a curve. Notice my pins are going in the direction of the back of my machine. I like to keep my needle in when I readjust just so that I can make sure I'm always sewing straight. Oh, and I ran out of that thread too. I guess I was destined to have to spool a bobbin. It was my destiny. All right, well, I'm going to use my machine. Has a fun little trick that lets me spool it while my needle's threaded, which is really fun and cool when it works. Come on. When it works, and it's not going to work on me right now, really. I need a lot. All right, it's going to be stubborn. That means I'm going to have to do this again in a sec. Don't do what I'm doing, guys. This is just me hacking my machine. If you want to know how to do a bobbin, go back earlier to what we talked about or check out my video on it in our lesson library. This was definitely a quick hack to get you guys out of here and moving on with your night. Okay. Again, I'm going to start where I left off, go back a little bit, lock my stitch. Now, what you guys can do if you want is grab a grommet and put a hole in here and put like a tie string on it. Grommets are super fun to install, to use a hammer. I always tease my students and tell them that it's a really good way to do stress relief. All right, we're going to trim all of our threads now. All these threads are getting trimmed. And I'll probably go in here later and just trim around the edges one more time on the inside here. Here is where I started. Okay. Oh, there it is. That's what I was looking for. Where we started. Trim all that away. So I'll probably go in the inside here and trim it up a little bit, even though I think it looks really cute. But there is my hat. How did yours come out? Oh my gosh, I'm trying to figure out which way I want to wear it. I really like it this way. I like that I made it a little bit bigger. Let me know in the comments if you guys want to see a project kit with one that's a little bit bigger, rimmed like so. This one I'm going to use my gardening hat. If you want to add grommets, put them right here, and then you can kind of bring it up through the bottom, around through the front, and back down, and then you have a tie string. Like and share this video. Make sure that you make sure that you post videos and pictures of you sewing. We want to see it. Tag us at Sewing by Amber or Amber and Jean, and let us know how we're doing. You can leave reviews on Facebook. You can leave reviews on Google. You can email us, sewingbyamber@gmail.com. Thanks, guys, for joining me. Have a lovely time sewing this project, and then I will see you on Sunday for our next, if you're part of Sewing Summer Camp, this Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern time, we will be sewing our final project, which is the roll-up organizer. So I will see you guys then. Bye.